for a large portion of greenhouse gas emissions and usually lack easy electrification options. And this is where green hydrogen produced using renewable energy and electrolysis emerges as a game changer. Here it can play a crucial role in decarbonizing Nigeria's hard-to-abate sectors. So for transportation, so trucks, buses, and ships traditionally powered by diesel or bunker fuels can be fueled by hydrogen fuel cells emitting only water vapor. So you can imagine Nigerian ports bustling with zero emissions, powered by green hydrogen, reducing air and water pollution. In the aviation sector, full electrification of planes remains distant, and hydrogen can be blended with jet fuel, significantly reducing emissions. In steel and cement production, these energy-intensive processes currently rely heavily on fossil fuels, and green hydrogen can replace coal in these processes, leading to cleaner production and significant emissions reductions. And fertilizer production as well, ammonia, a key component of fertilizer, can be synthesized using green hydrogen, creating a clean alternative to traditional carbon-intensive processes. This not only reduces emissions, but also contributes to food security and ensuring sustainable fertilizer production. However, beyond decarbonization, diversifying Nigeria's energy mix with domestically produced green hydrogen can reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels, enhance energy security, and potentially lower cost of energy. The hydrogen economy as well can create new jobs throughout the value chain in areas of installation, maintenance, transportation, and boosting the Nigerian workforce. And then also investing in green hydrogen research and development can position Nigeria as a leader in this emerging technology, attracting investment and fostering innovation. I think just as Abigail mentioned, Nigeria can have the opportunity to be a global leader in hydrogen technology. We have all the resources at our disposal that can give us a fair advantage. Yeah, thank you, Abel.
Thank you very much. I think it's very apparent that green hydrogen has a very multi-sectoral and multi-dimensional impact across sectors and across different dimensions, including R&D, labor, and all that. So thank you very much. I would like to bring in Mr. Patrick, who has also been innovating in terms of small scale or decentralized, I think waste to hydrogen, if I'm not mistaken. So I would like to hear his thoughts on the issue as well. Mr. Patrick. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you. We can hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. At Lumos Laboratories, we are into core research on conversion of waste into green hydrogen using electricity by renewable sources, solar, wind. We also do that by chemical reaction and operation by using bacteria, fermentation and other processes. We have been able to demonstrate that it is possible to do this at a lower scale and even expanded capacity. Then, if a private license or we have more medium scale company is able to demonstrate this, it's not issue of will and the right policy and the participation by the government and everyone involved for Nigeria to adopt fully into this. Because hydrogen is the best, as someone with a chemical background, hydrogen is the best energy, best source of energy we can have because of inherent advantages of using hydrogen, as some of the speakers have spoken. When you use hydrogen, the major byproduct is water vapor, and the lot of energy is released in the process. So, and Nigeria being the most populous black nation, we have a population. It's not that we cannot get it from other sources, but why we decide to choose waste? It's because we have a lot of waste and we have four waste ministries in the country. So that waste will not come to the source, and our byproducts are also used for other useful purposes. So I don't see reason why the country should not embrace it. And we have been talking with different agencies of government administration, and I think they are trying to get more involved. Look at the 2024 Nigerian budget, you see hydrogen projects, demonstration and stuff in among many, not few locations, only allocated to them. So the government is working on it. It remains small, or we still have a good gap to cover. Because on my own experience and advice, we mustn't look outside. Yes, we may not have all the facilities, all the equipment, all the machines, but based on what we have experienced, the country can be a major player in producing and exporting green hydrogen and the related technology. We have a lot to do to develop capacity, to train people, because we don't have a lot of players in this sector. I can mention up to 3-4 countries I know in Nigeria that are in this sector. So, but I know the future is bright. We have the right weather for solar and other renewable sources to power our devices generating green hydrogen. We have the population that is ready. We also have the manpower that are ready to work. So we need government participation to get this in place. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick. Okay, thank you very much. I think it's interesting you mentioned the government's increasing attention to this and the incorporation of demonstration projects in the 2024 budget, but we'll come to that later on. I just want to bring in Mr. Damilola to make comments about the issue from his own perspective as well. I see he has worked on international partnerships in terms of hydrogen, and is even involved with the government sector within Lagos State. So I'm wondering what perspectives he may have for green hydrogen. Mr. Damilola.
Well done. Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Thank you. So first of all, on my perspective on green hydrogen in Nigeria, I like the topic because, as you mentioned, is a means to energy transition. And what I would say first of all on that, like the previous speakers have alluded to, is the fact that green hydrogen will be an additional, source of energy apart from the existing, sources of energy that Nigeria currently has, right? And the way I would briefly talk about it, maybe if I'm speaking to a layman, would be that imagine at the time when you're talking about iPhone 15 today. When iPhone 1 came out, nobody would ever think that iPhone 15 would be in use today, So it's almost the same with hydrogen. In the case of Nigeria, we might think that, oh yes, this is probably far-fetched. But as the conversations build on and as things develop, we find that this is, a sustainable source of energy. In Nigeria's situation, might be challenging to have that. But I'll say clearly that first, it is an energy addition and not an energy replacement for Nigeria. And what that will mean is that it means that we're not going to discard all of our existing, energy sources, which of course we know we rely mainly on oil and gas. But green hydrogen will be of key addition. So the message is about energy addition and not energy replacement. So that's why I like the topic. And then the second part of it, I'll speak specifically about my engagement first in case of IPHE. So the IPHE is International Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells in the Economy. There's an IPHE and there is the IPHE Early Career Network, which I currently serve as chair. It is pioneered by the US Department of Energy. Principally, what the IPHE looks at is basically on facilitating partnerships. As we know, a number of this engagement will require, partnership between emerging countries and the developed ones. And I think that in the case of Nigeria, there's still conversations that are going on, as we know. I know, as far as I know, the Nigerian German Green Hydrogen Office, is pushing for some policy in that space. And I think that there is also the African Hydrogen Partnership, the AHP, which is, of course, not based in Nigeria. I think it's based in Mauritania, but there are a number of prominent Nigerians in that organization too that are pushing beyond conversation, but actually seeing how projects can be implemented. And let's all get it right. And I'm sure other speakers will also agree. Green hydrogen is still in its early stage, and even for developed countries, I think a number of the conversation is still about how can we build partnership, how can we transfer technology, and how can we, ensure that we have a partnership that both partners benefit from. So in the end, I would say, to summarize, first, green hydrogen for Nigeria would be an energy addition and a valuable one as such. In terms of partnership, the focus we should have as a developing country, and given our oil and gas as the major state of our energy source, is that we should try to look at a partnership if we're dealing with other countries that also, serves as a win-win for us. I want to speak more on the side of what the government is doing, because in this case, I won't be speaking for anyone in energy, but I guess these are my first thoughts on it, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick. I think we all, one of the key lessons we're hearing about is that green hydrogen is an addition and mainly targeted at decarbonizing hard-to-abate sectors. And although it may not be competitive right now compared to blue hydrogen globally and then within Nigeria and Africa, the efforts towards building the foundations and the foundations in terms of R&D and policy are still important, and also partnerships as Mr. Damilola has stated. So this brings us into the tangent of what is happening in the green hydrogen space within Nigeria. We know of different actors that are playing a role, the German Nigeria Hydrogen Office, but also at the level of policy with the Energy Commission of Nigeria and their hydrogen team. And Mr. Patrick also mentioned demonstration projects within the 2024 federal government's budgets, and perhaps also with the Energy Transition Office and the Energy Transition Plan. So since you are all within the space, you may have insights in terms of the government's policy direction that others or the enthusiasts reading research papers and articles may not be privy to. So I would like you to talk about what the sense or the direction that you feel the government is going towards, whether it is enough compared to, say, Namibia, South Africa, and others that are driving the sector in Africa, and what you see are the problems in this area with respect to government promotion. So I will begin with Ms. Ogosa, since she had mentioned compliance measures in the beginning and the need to set this, since it is part of our net zero targets, and the need to set deep decarbonization pathways and compliance measures. So Ms. Ogosa, can you?
Yeah, hi, Errol. Thank you again. So I'll just maybe start by saying I'd want to separate the conversation on compliance measures into two. The first being the introduction of the Energy Transition Plan. I'm echoing, I don't know why. I think someone's mic's on. Okay, great. The first being the Energy Transition Plan, which was introduced in August 2022 by the Nigerian government then. And in the Energy Transition Plan, there is some emphasis on the introduction of hydrogen in our industries. One key part of industries, through my work that I'm getting to understand and learn more how Nigeria can benefit from, is in the cement and ammonia industry. So industrialization, which includes development for infrastructure, has a lot of cement involved in it. So concrete, this is from our road, the buildings, pavements, everything really that has infrastructure laid down and it has cement. The cement sector emits about 16% of the global emissions. And what this means is for every new building that goes up, for every new bridge that's built, we're talking about building an extension to the the MM2 bridge, that would need a significant amount of cement. Now, cement being a very high contributor to greenhouse gas, if we're able to find alternatives to those fuels, that could significantly reduce the emissions that comes from industrialization that Nigeria has to tap into. An alternative around reducing this could mean stuff like someone mentioned the changing of production fuels. So when cement is produced, you have to actually have a lot of the clean, which is the production of it. The clinker, which is used in the production of cement, has to be heavily decarbonized. In order to do this, we're seeing things like when you're using, instead of the traditional coal, we're using natural gas. Instead of natural gas, we're using waste biofuel products. Instead of biofuel products, we're actually introducing cogeneration, which then reduces the impact that cement production could have, hence reducing the emissions from industries. So that's one aspect. I know that there's some international, like in Germany and the Netherlands, there's some organizations who are trying to reduce the emissions from industries, and genuinely one that Nigeria can identify a clear pathway to. This also maybe could lead to understanding that industrialization for buildings as well as manufacturing of other other emission-heavy infrastructure could also determine the speed in which Nigeria, for example, is able to integrate new technologies. I also wanted to draw attention to the fact that a lot of the cement that's currently being used in Nigeria isn't even being used to full capacity. So again, because we're just not there yet, we have the opportunity to make sure that the cement that we're using for general infrastructure meets particular criteria to meet our net zero plans. Again, like I mentioned, we have to kind of start now if you're trying to meet the goal by 2060. The next aspect of compliance in industry that I wanted to draw on is this introduction of, and which follows up from ammonia markets, is the introduction of the cross-border adjustment mechanism. This was introduced by the EU 2 years ago, but it's now gone into a transitional stage. And as a sustainability and compliance professional myself, I go into understanding how African markets like Nigeria can really take advantage of this carbon initiative, because what that means is, rather than us kind of business as usual in our manufacturing of like ammonia for fertilizers, etc., and we're able to use low carbon systems at the onset to make sure we meet the demand for international global trade. So when we look at hydrogen production for ammonia, which is a very big export commodity for ammonia, if we're able from the onset now to make sure that our ammonia production or ammonia industries are low carbon, it makes sure that we're leapfrogging into being compliant to international markets. And then another thing that I would add is also when we consider countries playing a role in Africa, there's a need for knowledge exchange and information partnership. A lot of the issues that we currently face as a continent is the fact that Namibia is doing one thing, South Africa is doing another thing, Nigeria is doing another thing. Even inside Nigeria, Lagos State is doing one thing, Ondo State has a different thing in mind. When we look at Europe, for example, while the European Union is very big and sparse and different countries have their own ambitions, there is a global plan to reduce greenhouse gas or implement hydrogen production, for example. We need to get to a point in Nigeria where different states are playing a role towards this national plan. So when it comes to hydrogen, I know Ondo State has been very, front about, introducing some demonstration plants in hydrogen. We see now, so I used to be with the Global Hydrogen Diplomacy Program that's been mentioned a few times on this call. the team and when I was there. And right now the team is obviously working on introducing policies and also frameworks to support the Nigerian government. But then we also see independent states kind of like trying to leverage their own renewable sources into meeting the hydrogen demand. And finally, one last thing I'd mention is the concept of additionality. When I first started talking about hydrogen 3 years ago, people are like, oh, how Nigeria is using hydrogen? We don't even have oil and gas. We haven't used it. We haven't used it. Like, okay. The prospects behind additionality is that when producing green hydrogen, we're also increasing the renewable energy capacity for use. So if we have to introduce about 50 gigawatts of solar systems for production of hydrogen, we need to make sure that the production of hydrogen that's going to come out of that is going to mean that for this community that has this mini grid, they're going to have power, they're going to have electricity first, and whatever's left of that electricity would go to the production of green hydrogen. That is one addition. The concept of additionality, and which I talk about quite often as well, allows for sustainable net zero targets to be met. So you're not going to go to my village in Edo State now and have a mini grid facility for hydrogen production. Meanwhile, my grandmother in the back doesn't have light in the house. We're not doing that again. That was the issues that we experienced in the oil and gas, especially in the gas train. And that's one thing that we have to completely emphasize when it comes to decarbonization in Nigeria, as well as industrialization, to make sure the concept of additionality is important when it comes to compliance, and also making sure Nigeria as a country is industry ready for a net zero future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent contribution. At the CBAM makes business as usual, or would make business as usual in terms of exports unprofitable. I will put a premium on expanding green ammonia now and in the future. So that is very interesting. And then knowledge exchange partnerships between governments of different countries across Africa and the different states at the subnational level that are trying out demonstration projects. I know of Ondo, as you mentioned, and I think Cross River is another state. And then the need to incorporate into any policy or roadmap the requirements that host communities for hydrogen projects, whether at the level of mini grids or large plants, should have electricity first rather than being exploited in the sense of having these systems installed but not having access to the electricity, the green electricity. So thank you, Ogosa. I'll then move to the Kat Long. So Kat Long, what do you think, or what do you sense is the direction taken by the Nigerian government, or even at the level of ECOWAS with the ECOWAS strategy, and what can be learned from policies in other African countries in terms of green hydrogen?
All right, thank you. So as it stands, Nigeria lacks a concrete, comprehensive policy framework dedicated to green hydrogen production in Nigeria. And then one way a Nigerian government can handle this, or can tackle this issue, actually, Nigerian government actually acknowledges the potential for green hydrogen and its role in transitioning towards a more sustainable energy mix. I think that's through the nationally determined contributions, and then the Nigerian Energy Transition Office, and all of those efforts on that front. And then I think the activities of the German Hydrogen Office in Nigeria, and then where they fund research and all of that to explore the opportunities and challenges for green hydrogen development in Nigeria. And in addition, I think the Ministry of Science and Technology have undertaken initiatives to promote hydrogen research and development. And then we can also see in the private sector, companies like Shell and NNPC are exploring potential green hydrogen projects in Nigeria as well. And but possible future directions, I think, and the Nigerian government can take, and we can see practical steps Nigerian government could prioritize enacting a dedicated green hydrogen policy that aligns clear targets, incentive, and regulation. So things like feed-in tariffs, which can guarantee a price on energy generated through renewable sources of hydrogen. There can be carbon pricing, and also the carbon border adjustment program. I think a recent article came out where the the EU are trying to see how they can extend a semblance of the carbon border adjustment programs across the globe. So it encompasses just the EU market, but a situation where you can find other different countries have something similar that fits the dynamics of their own economy and their own situation. And yeah, as regards policy as well. So that's also a way Nigerian government can try to key into. And then there's also knowledge sharing and technology transfer as well. So countries like Morocco, Namibia, and Mauritania in Africa are leading the way in green hydrogen. So Nigerian can glean insights from those countries. They can do joint research and development, partnering on research development initiatives too. Yeah, and then streamlining or collaborating and developing compatible policies as well, and regulatory frameworks across the region. And then there's also shared infrastructure and resources. So a lot of these African countries that have this existing or are already developing the green hydrogen sector, Nigeria can regionally cooperate with them, which allowed shared investments, large-scale infrastructure like pipelines, storage facilities, manufacturing plants, and reducing individual costs and optimizing resource utilization. Because the main issue or the main challenge with hydrogen in Nigeria generally is the high cost of setting up hydrogen. And then one other thing the Nigerian government can exploit is the global demand of hydrogen. So there's a huge demand of hydrogen, and Nigeria can position itself as a key player in that demand to meet part of the demand. And then there's also the African Green Hydrogen Alliance as well that fosters knowledge sharing, project development, and joint ventures between member countries. And so Nigeria can partner with other countries, or the Nigerian government can partner with other countries, take on pilot projects as well. So while there are also some challenges as well, each country has a different level of preparedness and all of that, and different dynamics, but there's the opportunity, there's the market, there's the demand, and there are the resources that Nigerian government can use to drive policy and just drive adoption basically of green hydrogen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alex. All this is very interesting. I'm getting the sense that green hydrogen is a very, very internationalized technology and fuel. And it seems that international partnerships, international peer learning, and drawing lessons from other African countries is a very key part of the issue and the opportunities and risks created by the cross-border adjustment mechanism as well. So very interesting. Mr. Damilola, do you have a sense of beyond the international partnerships, what say state governments and the federal governments are looking at in terms of green hydrogen in Nigeria?
Well, thank you very much again for that. Of course, you know that some part of that would, there's some classified information that won't be let out. But of course, I can say with all certainty that in terms of the partnership, because of course, we know that a number of things that Nigeria needs to do to progress in this regard would require partnership, right? And technology transfer, a lot of which all the speakers here today have alluded to. So I would speak particularly from the Nigerian Energy Transition Office. So that's from the federal level. Some of the speakers today have alluded to that. But I think pointing out some of the challenges that might be involved in that, right? So I think the key thing is still more about forming a policy framework, which steps have been taken in that regard, but more importantly, getting finance and checking suitability for Nigeria to undertake a green hydrogen project. I think if I'm speaking from a government perspective, those are still some of the things that are being discussed. Like, because if you speak about this, of course, it's a very good idea, and you always understand that the government tries to understand things from certain ways in which members of the general public might not see. Right. So the first thing first is to understand how bankable is green hydrogen. How bankable is it? So and by bankability of green hydrogen here, what I mean is that in the case of Nigeria, do we have enough finance for it? And will it be profitable if we venture into this? So on the government side, there's still some studies being done on that. A number of it would still rely on partnership. And that's why I said that the Energy Transition Office is doing something in that regard in terms of policy and policy advocacy and a number of that. But I will also mention the fact that Nigeria is also very fortunate to have Damilola Ogunbiyi heading the United Nations Sustainable Energy for All, SE for All, also advancing course for the Nigeria Energy Transition Office, to ensure that a number of what the country needs in terms of, knowledge transfer, in terms of finance, which is very key, are being done. So those are, key steps on the way. But I would say one key thing I should also mention is that while all the speakers have mentioned about, how beneficial green hydrogen is, I think a number of things that we always do not look at is, in the end, when we form partnership with other countries, are we actually looking at the clauses we sign in this partnership? How do we ensure that in the end we try to balance our needs to meet, of course, energy security and increase our secure our energy security, while at the same time we're trying to transition? How do we strike a delicate balance between that? And looking at that with the partnership, because if I may also mention that I don't know if anyone has taken a very close look at the EU-Namibia Green Hydrogen Partnership. The finance given for that is mostly a loan. So sometimes we're excited about this, new sources of energy, and there's no doubt about that, But the key thing is also that we as young people, let me say that, need to begin to position what are the clauses involved in this? How do we renegotiate so that we have, an energy transition that is favorable to our situation? So the thing is not about being excited about green hydrogen coming in and about the partnership coming in, but how do we strike a win-win partnership? So I would say personally from my end, I'm advancing some cause on that, but of course there's still more that can be done beyond that. On the state level, I won't have anything to say yet on that, as a number of that will still be left to. I mean, if I were to be the Commissioner on Energy, maybe I'll give you all the answers on that, but I think I'll just leave it at that. I hope those were helpful enough.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Damilola. Very interesting points you raised about reading the fine print when it comes to international partnerships, especially North-South partnerships, and for these large-scale projects that may involve getting indebted in terms of public debt. So thank you. I'll now turn to Mr. Patrick. So I'm wondering, for example, in the mini-grid, in the e-mobility, electric mobility sector, some e-mobility companies have complained that they do not receive enough support from their governments or even recognition at the state level and even at the federal level. Sometimes they are not, even when they are having policy discussions, at least at the early stages, many of them were not involved in those discussions. So I'm wondering if, Mr. Patrick, you are facing something like that when you are debating generally, and then with respect to whether you are seeing beyond the demonstration projects that you've seen in the 2024 budgets, if there's any green lights you are getting from any government ministry or agency with respect to what you are doing. Hello, Mr. Patrick. Okay, it seems he may be having network issues. All right, so I'll just move on. So this is all very interesting, and I want to ask about something very interesting that we got to know about or got to realize when we're engaging with stakeholders at the policy level. So first, we know that there's an interministerial committee on hydrogen that has been constituted but not yet inaugurated. And this is supposed to be it's allegedly headed by the Ministry of Power. And the Energy Commission of Nigeria is also doing some work on reports for different sectors where hydrogen applies. So going in line with the energy transition plan, which has different sectors where green hydrogen would apply, giving a study of different sectors and policy recommendations as a pathway towards a possible roadmap for hydrogen, and which would likely aid the interministerial committee. But we want to know what you think in terms of the fact that, so first, two things. One is that there's a perception that the renewable energy sector in terms of policy in Nigeria is fragmented and too fragmented. So you do not have a Ministry of Energy. You have a Ministry of Power, which has largely and still dominantly focuses on the large-scale electricity projects and the national grid sector, while the Rural Electrification Agency, which is an agency under the Ministry of Power, is focused on least costs. Initially, the perception was off-grid electrification, rural electrification, but least cost electrification effectively. So what do you think about this fragmentation that if there's any the ECN, which may be tasked with developing policies for the renewable energy sector, does not have a ministerial level mandate, and so may be seen as subordinate to ministries. And in some subsectors of the renewable energy sector, you hear tussles in terms of that. And then on the other side, I don't want to be controversial, but there are perceptions by others as well that the German Nigeria office is tending towards hydrogen as an export product, and the interests of the Germans is hydrogen as exports, not for domestic use, while the ETO Energy Transition Office supported by SE4All is also SE4All America and all that. So I was wondering what you think of this perceived tensions within the Nigerian renewable energy space and what it may imply for green hydrogen. Let me begin with with Alex. Hello, Alex.
Can you hear me? I'm having a bit of network. Hello? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you now. We can hear you.
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Okay, I think your network is still an issue. So I'll come back to you then. Ms. Ogosa, can you take it up?
Yes, Abel, hi. Can you hear me? Yeah, right, great. No, really great point you've raised about the priorities for different teams and organizations when it comes to hydrogen supply. One thing I would first for raise is, as Africans, and I think Mr. Damilola mentioned this as well, we need to place national endeavors and national priorities at the forefront of anything we do. So when it comes to developing a hydrogen market, the first priority should really be developing domestic markets as well. While that may not automatically look like hydrogen for fuel cells, for vehicles, we can look at hydrogen into ammonia and fertilizers, thereby reducing the emissions that we incur in agriculture, for example. Like I mentioned, industry emissions in industrialization. The domestic markets also then allow for introduction for infrastructure. So obviously, hydrogen as well, ammonia, for example, well, green ammonia that's produced from hydrogen in Ondo State or Cross River would most likely be used in a different state. What kind of transportation infrastructure have we developed for that? Those kind of things are what stems the domestic market before we can even start talking about exporting hydrogen from Nigeria to Germany or what have you, you know? And then the second thing is also the current off-taker agreements. Again, I love the fact that this has been raised on being transparent and observant to contracts that are being signed or exciting announcements. But while there's been a lot of MOUs which are have been signed, momentum over understanding, MOUs have been signed, not contracts, but like concept plans have been introduced, we're still having a very low percentage for offtake agreements. Offtake agreements that desperately mean that if Namibia, for example, is producing one gigawatt of hydrogen or whatever the case might be, who's going to buy this hydrogen? Is the same situation that we had in the oil and gas sector where, you know, the Europe was ready to import it from Africa to refine, so the demand and supply were aligned. Currently, there's a magnitude of potential supply and an even greater magnitude for potential for demand. But there's been, I think, there was about a 14% of off-taker agreements from just last year. So we're still at a very low trajectory when it comes to who is going to be buying this hydrogen, right? So hence the adoption of domestic market is so important when even having these conversations. And then lastly, which I spoke about at the beginning, is also what kind of infrastructures are being put in place. Hydrogen is very corrosive. What that means is it is highly inflammable. It's a very colorless, odorless gas. It's not like petrol where you see fuel on the floor. Oh my gosh, there's diesel somewhere. It's very, very, very also very temperamental. And what that means is things like hydrogen detectors or hydrogen smoke detectors have to start being introduced within country. And that infrastructure, again, even in Europe, is still being developed. Another part of infrastructure is the electrolyzers, which for green hydrogen technology would it helps the process of electrolysis. That again is technology that is only finally breeding up space in international markets. And then we even go all the way back to, if you're talking about green hydrogen now, to PV systems. The solar market is doing great on panels. However, on the other side, batteries are currently even getting more expensive. So obviously that whole supply chain, there is a lot of upscaling that needs to happen. And for Nigeria to get there, we need to have domestic infrastructure and domestic plans to actually feed to local demand for hydrogen before we even start looking at exports. Yeah, that's really just where I am. Well, it's really great for us to play in global trade of hydrogen. Countries like India have shown that they have a priority for domestic use of hydrogen, and now they're more comfortable talking about exporting. But countries like Nigeria just haven't made it a priority. So until we can make domestic use of hydrogen in any form it comes as a priority, it's going to be very hard to demonstrate how it could be useful for international trade. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you very much. So, I guess in other words, it means that Nigeria's promotion of hydrogen as a renewable energy should also be accompanied or should be embedded in a broader green industrialization policy direction where our existing industries, heavy industries and medium level industries are able to incorporate hydrogen into their decarbonization at the same time as they are growing, so that offtake is increasing as hydrogen production increases in essence. So that is very interesting. And in terms of the policy side, what I'm seeing is that the collaboration between any agency that will be driving green hydrogen adoption in Nigeria, whether the ECN or Ministry of Power or Ministry of Petroleum Resources, should be closely engaged with the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, and any ministry that is driving the industrialization agenda for Nigeria. So thank you, Ms. Ogosa. I'll go back to Alex if you are back. I see you just went off. Okay, Mr. Damilola.
Yes, please. Could you please repeat the question for a bit? I lost you.
So the question was mainly about the administrative fragmentation at the government level, the federal government level of renewable energy policy making, and also on the other hand, the potential or the concerns that some people are having that the promotion of hydrogen by the Germans or the Americans is about hydrogen for exports and not adequately articulated within the Nigerian domestic market. So as Mr. Gosa said, off-takers and how to drive their incorporation into the domestic hydrogen market. So what do you think about that, hydrogen for exports versus domestic use?
Yeah, thank you very much again for that question. That's a very, very good question. I would say that for each country looking at hydrogen, what is clear is that every country tries to pursue its own interest first. But when we're talking about a partnership, the end goal is such that we should have a partnership that favors both partners, right? That is what it ought to be. But sometimes we find that this is usually not the case, right? And this is why, the conversation around if we produce hydrogen and it is not of use in our country and it is only exported to international markets, then of what use is it, right? And this is where, again, I would reemphasize that this is why we need to get our partnership clauses right. So it's not about the excitement of signing the partnership. Of course, it's about looking at the clauses there and trying to, emphasize on the negotiation of the terms, right? I would say in terms of Nigeria, of course, we don't have any such partnership yet, but I'll say there are baby steps being taken. And I think the awareness that is increasing around the world, and particularly in case of Namibia, South Africa, and a number of these countries that are getting into this partnership, is the fact that, look, if this partnership is coming to Nigeria, we need to ensure that it also meets our own domestic demand. And it's not just about, oh, yes, it can produce this and that. And we're just serving as a battery country, to another country that already still relies on other sources of energy, if we want to be frank about it. And this is not to create an argument out of it and to say, let's discard the whole conversation on green hydrogen. a number of the developed countries that are talking about green hydrogen still rely on coal. You know, I won't say much on that, but I mean, if people who are aware on that, and this is not a defense to say that Nigeria should not transition or not, but I'm saying that at some point we always need to, you know, see how, of course, we would export, right? But what percentage of what we intend, of what use will green hydrogen be to our own local economy? We need to, you know, bring our focus more on that. And of course, in the case of Nigeria, it starts first with advocacy. It starts first with getting the right people to, you know, to make the right conversations and to make, you know, the right networking. And I think that's very important. I think a lot of what we talk about, of course, sometimes can be theoretical for people who might not already be in this space, right? We also need to emphasize that networking is very key, because if we have the best set of minds and the best set of people who can get things done, it is with that sort of synergy that we can then drag these things forward altogether. So just to summarize all that I've said again, of course, it is very clear, and from the Nigerian point of view, that we would clearly be watching out and see. I'm sure we have a number of key high-level stakeholders. As I've mentioned, the Nigeria Energy Transition Office is there. I won't speak, but on the state level in terms of energy, because I'm not in energy at the moment, but you know, of course, privy to understand and see energy investments, you know, which sits under this ministry where I'm currently at. But the truth about this is that we're currently positioning and seeing how, you know, a lot of these deals would be, you know, mutually beneficial. So that should be the conversation. We're not just exporting. It's part of it. We're going to profit from that. But then again, how will it solve our own electricity access, energy security demands? So I think those are my thoughts on it.
Thank you very much. All very interesting thoughts on the need to balance between foreign and domestic interests is another key theme of what you're all saying. Since both Mr. Alex and Mr. Patrick seem to not be here, I think we can move to the Q&A session if there's no other intervention. So, Mr. Gusa and Mr. Damdola, if you have nothing, no last comments, then we can move on.
Well, maybe you can allow me make my own final comments. Well, let me thank CleanTech All again for organizing, for extending the invitation. I think.
Hello.
Yes, but I might have to leave. I might have to leave soon, though. So I thought you were to make a closing remark.
No. Just before the Q&A, so you will just help us answer one or two questions.
All right.
All right. Okay. Abigail, I think you can. Or Marlon. All right.
All right. Thank you very much, Abel, for moderating this section. It was quite insightful, as well as the discussions that has been going through. It's quite interesting to see how hydrogen is expanding globally and in Africa as well, and to see how some of the African countries, Namibia, South Africa, are doing great in the hydrogen sector, and how Nigeria is beginning to expand its front lines as regarding the hydrogen sector. So there are a few questions that I have or that were dropped in the chat box, of which I'm going to ask the panelists. So for the first question, someone asked about the costs of producing, storing, and the infrastructure that is involved in green hydrogen. So the person says that producing, storage, and infrastructure involved in green hydrogen can be expensive compared to other energy sources. And investors, such as commercial banks, find it difficult to invest in that field. Rather, they venture into investing in renewables. So, what are the financial models to be utilized for such projects in a large scale, which could be adopted by communities? So, this is the first question. So, I'm just throwing it out to any of the panelists who can answer. So any of the panelists can answer, or should I call names? I don't know.
Hi, Marlon. I don't think I understood your question. Could you just repeat, summarize the question you had, please?
Okay. Let me repeat the question again. The person said producing storage and infrastructure involved in green hydrogen can be expensive compared to other energy sources. And investors, such as commercial banks, find it difficult to invest in that field. So the person is asking, what are the financial models that can be utilized for such projects in large scale, which could be adopted by communities, considering the fact that the production and storage of this green hydrogen is expensive. So the person is asking, probably, are there alternative business models that could be adopted to minimize the cost of green hydrogen production?
Okay, yeah, that's clear. Well, I'm not a financing expert, but one thing I would mention is we are seeing, obviously, we've had experience from the solar renewable state when we looked into how a lot of the mini grids have been financed in the past. But when it comes to hydrogen, it's quite peculiar because hydrogen doesn't just take in, from PV straight to electrification. There's also storage. There's the pipelines. There's electrolyzers that have to be used. Namibia had set up a fund for one of their hydrogen plans that they actually put out. And what that actually looks like is a scenario for financing where different stakeholders can basically contribute to. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Can basically contribute to their hydrogen endeavors. So this Namibia Investment Fund, which is actually heavily led and supported by the government, allows for different stakeholders to come in at different interjections for hydrogen production. So that's quite new because you can understand it's quite complicated, but to really give business case scenarios, again, it's very, very specific to particular countries or funding. Like countries that already manufacture their PV systems don't have to import, or countries that already have some source of storage facilities for hydrogen would not have to have external or rather international importing mechanisms or tariffs for those kind of financing. So I think it just really differs. And I'm going to share a podcast episode that I spoke on a few months ago, really just detailing what this Namibian investment fund was going to look like, and maybe that would provide some more clarity. But generally, for financing and business endeavors, might be hard to pinpoint it because I don't want to overestimate what that could look like, especially as we're still waiting to see what different governments or different private sectors introduce down the line. So it is very nascent, as you can understand. We're still trying to understand the technology to start with, but the financing is quite delicate.
Okay, thank you very much, Ogosa. Thank you very much.
All right, if I can just throw in more light. Sorry,
okay.
I was having network issues before then. Yeah, so one of the main challenges with green hydrogen production, it's the financial investment or the huge cost, as we all know. And I think one of the ways, one of the models that can be adopted are long-term power purchase agreements with renewable energy developers can secure stable and competitively priced electricity. And one thing with green hydrogen production is it can be integrated into renewable energy sources, and this also helps with intermittency issues with renewables. So usually renewables are intermittent, so they're not always active. So once you're able to integrate hydrogen production with existing renewable infrastructures, that can drive down the cost significantly, because you can store green hydrogen and then you use fuel cells to convert it back to electricity when you need that. So that's a way. Then issuing green bonds as well, or participating in climate bond initiative can attract investors seeking sustainable investment with potential tax benefits. Government grants and subsidies as well can act as a way to reduce upfront costs and incentivize early stage projects. And there are also carbon credits and emissions trading. So green hydrogen projects can generate carbon credits by displacing emissions from fossil fuels. And then selling these credits in compliance markets can create additional revenue streams for offset production costs. And then there's also collaboration between government and private investors can leverage public funding and private sector expertise to share risks and accelerate project development. Yeah, and then dedicated hydrogen investment funds, as the other panelists mentioned. We can set up dedicated investment funds focusing on green hydrogen to attract large-scale capital from institutional investors seeking exposure in these emerging markets. However, as it has been established, it's a new industry and it's still trying to figure things around. But there are a few steps coupled with research and development, economics of scale. So supporting large-scale green hydrogen production usually brings down the lower unit cost and attracting further investment. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Katlong. Thank you very much for that insightful explanation. So I don't know if the other panelists have something to say as regards to the financing aspect of green hydrogen. Okay, I think I will go ahead with the next question to save us time. Sorry, comment. So another question here says that between blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, which one of them should the Nigerian government choose as it dominates shades, considering the market and Nigeria's abundant natural gas reserve? So which of these hydrogen should the Nigerian government choose first, between the blue hydrogen and the green hydrogen?
Maybe I can quickly jump on that before I leave. So I think the conversation shouldn't be on which should we jump on first. I think if we're able to start with the blue, I think it's fine. And to be frank and to be very honest with everyone here, we're more or less going to start with blue hydrogen, and take priority over that because, of course, we're still heavily reliant on oil and gas, and it might be easier for us to, do blue before green. But I mean, whichever one comes first. But on a policy standpoint and on on a national, given resources and limited finance that might come into it, given the fact that we don't even have any partnership secured yet in that space, we would be exploring blue before green.
All right, thank you very much for that clarity. Obviously, blue hydrogen should be what Nigeria should be focused on. So I don't know if the other panelists have something to say as regards to that as well. All right, if there is none, then I think that's the list of questions we have for now. So I'm going to hand over to Abigail. If there are any other questions, then I'll come back. But for now, there are no questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Marlon. Thank you for moderating that. Thank you also to the panelists for your interactive discussions and for the thought pieces and interesting discussions we have had so far. Just before we close, we are going to have a group photograph. Can we all turn on our video to have a quick photograph? Okay, so please can we all say cheese as we take the pictures? Okay. Okay, let's take just one more last picture before we close. Is that okay? All right, thank you very much for attending this webinar. We will have more events and more webinars as the months go by. And please kindly follow our social media handles. We posted it in the chat box. Our LinkedIn account, our Instagram and Facebook. Please kindly follow and engage with most of our posts. Thank you very much for joining and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Have a good day, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Makinki.
Thank you.
Thank you.